A real parent is dedicated to teaching their son or daughter, their child, their baby, the meaning of right and wrong. No parent, real parent, enjoys having to discipline a child to teach them honesty, integrity, respect based upon their actions and the repercussion of those actions. But I'll tell you what, and I've learned this through personal experience, when it comes down to criminal activity, a parent's discipline and the very methods that they use could forever build not only a bond, but even more so, trust. I'm ARHayes. This is Convict's Thoughts. I'm going to share with you a little bit of a personal story to help guide you through my feelings and thoughts when it comes to Bryan Kohberger and his father. We're going to talk about the cell phone incident. I want to take a brief moment and give the basic reasoning why I came to the want to create this video. This past Sunday was Father's Day. And in my mind, I've been thinking a lot lately because I've seen so many people talking about the Kohberger family, which obviously many have been talking about for a very long period of time. You know, across the board, so many people care and want the very best for this family, but still, every single day, there's negativity presented upon this family due to the fact that so many people have already gauged the guiltiness of Bryan Kohberger on all these steps through his past. And that reflects, in many cases, negatively upon his own family, which people still talk about are coming to the courthouse to testify against their son and their brother, and they have all these negative things to say. But you know what? I want to just sit here with you, and we're not only going to discuss the basics of the Kohberger family, which I want to preface this by saying this very, very important statement. I am not speaking from direct handshake knowledge of the Kohbergers. I'm utilizing my thought process based off of my own personal experiences, reflecting at what we've seen of Bryan Kohberger and his past and his interaction that he's had with his family. And I'm presenting that to you in my thoughts of the bond that they share. Now, you see, I, like Bryan Kohberger, at an early age, did dumb stuff. And it sounds like he had some rough patches in life himself. And the hardest thing about that, especially coming and going on a day like Mother's Day, and then to follow suit the very next month with a Father's Day, someone like myself that has thrown my entire family out the window because of my own actions and decision making, still finds time to sit back and reflect. And I have this gut feeling because Bryan Kohberger has been sitting in a jail cell now going on 3 years. Let me tell you, that's an extremely lonely experience. You don't have friends and family and people around you to support you on an in and out every single day basis. You have to make it through on your very own will, your very own emotions, and your very own capability to adapt to your surroundings. And it's not the easiest thing to do. But you also, at the end of the day, have to realize that his family has to make the adjustments and the adaptations based upon the situation that Bryan Kohberger is in himself. His family tried through the years to love and support Bryan, and it reflects and it shows that not only did they do it then, but they're still doing it today. You see, one of the most difficult parts of parenting comes down to how do you teach your children to work their way through life in a way that will deem them as a success at the end of the road. You want them to walk not only a successful path that gives them the privileges and the necessities of life, but you want them to enjoy it, love things about their life, have people that they share love with. You just want the best of all worlds. No, I'm not a father. I've never, ever thought that I would be capable. But look, I was a son. At one point, I was a son of a handful of fathers because I had an adoptive father who divorced my mother, and then I had a stepfather that followed in behind that became dad. And let me tell you, Bryan Kohberger's father began the teaching of the hardest of lessons when Bryan Kohberger decided to do what many consider to be the unthinkable when he stole from his very own family a basic cell phone. And his dad, at that point, had to make a decision on disciplining Bryan. What was going to be the best route, the best means, and the best end result in not only disciplining him right then, currently, for the actions, but for the long-term learning lessons. This is how the capability of knowing the difference between right and wrong, the difference between honesty, integrity, and respect, and not being an honest person, all comes into play. Bryan Kohberger's father did discipline him for the cell phone incident, even calling the authorities. And let me tell you, that's not a bad decision. In most cases, the fear of bringing the authorities into the mix will teach a child that they don't want to deal with the cuffs. They don't want to deal with the back seat of the cars, and they sure don't want to go to that very place that's actually a little bit scary at the end of the day, called jail. Then you got to work your way through the courts and everything else. So Bryan Kohberger's father obviously decided, and it must have been a tough decision, to alert the authorities and begin the process of teaching his son a lesson. Now, of course, he's not trying to lock Bryan up and throw away the key. No, no, no. This is a very visual, up in your face type of lesson. You go through the steps, but you don't go through the process, because Bryan Kohberger legitimately was only 14 years old. Now, at the end of the day, in a situation like this, if it does work the way that it's supposed to work, and in this case, it very much seems as though it potentially did, it builds a bond and it builds trust between the people that are enduring life's lessons together to learn what happened, why it happened, and how to overcome it and never let it happen again. And if you really think about it, it must have hit home with Bryan Kohberger because, yes, he also had some addiction issues. He obviously had some theft issues. And that all typically, when a thief begins their path, some of the very first people they hurt the most by committing their initial crimes is against their family. And especially when you roll that dice and you throw it into the mix, when you get into the narcotic aspect of it, the addiction, that even makes it harder on the family because they're the very first target. Even if someone like Bryan Kohberger or myself truly did love their family, it's unfortunate, but we still make them the targets. But you can see through it all. Bryan Kohberger made his way through those very tough situations, even through the addiction, to overcome that and draw upon a new want, a new drive in life. And that was education and the potential career that followed it. Because I'm sure Bryan Kohberger took note of the struggles that his parents had financially, the stability of taking care of a family, being able to put food on the table. Bryan Kohberger, when he was sober, put the pieces together of how difficult all of that was. And there's no doubt in my mind that was one of the very things that triggered him into the cycle of changing his life for the better. Now, at the end of the day, I can't tell you what the end result of Bryan Kohberger's change is because I don't know where this case is going to end up and what new information we're going to learn. But I see the steps that were transpiring that led all the way to the point where I saw a 28-year-old young man get a master's degree, get accepted into a PhD program, left home to attend said PhD program, and was even driven enough to begin pursuing a career in law enforcement. Did he slip back into a potential addiction? I don't know. Did he continue down the path of maybe spinning out of control at some point because he lost his senses when he left the state of Pennsylvania, left the love of his family, and went to Washington State? I don't know. But I know up until the point of where he was at when the arrest happened, he was still working towards his PhD. He was still attending school. He still had his own apartment. He still had his own car. And I don't see any arrest records for criminal activity. I don't see any addiction or narcotic type charges. I don't see any burglary or robbery or theft or even petty theft charges. I don't see any of it unless you revert back to what has come out that his father took the opportunity to discipline Bryan based upon him taking the cell phone from his sister. It happened within the family, and the dad took immediate action to teach Bryan a lesson, calling the authorities. Now, let me share a little bit of a story with you that's on the personal side. So for all of you that don't like my personal stories, that don't like how I tie some of my experiences or what I've gained from those into my content, this is a good time to end. But you see, I've been through a similar situation as Bryan Kohberger when it came to committing a crime at a young age and a father, this being my stepfather, stepping to the plate to try his darndest to teach me a lesson, and he used tough love to do it. I just happened to wander out of the home. I was all of 11 years old. I had already been on the path of lying and theft. It began within the home. I took from my own family on a constant basis, and I lied to them all the time, and I was only 11. So I was already on a career path of criminal activity. Many people shake their head and say, that's not even possible. You were only 11. Oh, it's possible. I'm proof. Now, don't get me wrong. I was still going to school. I was getting my education. I was playing sports, but I just had this issue on the side called criminal activity. I was dishonest. So I left my home at the age of 11 on just a normal day, walking down the streets of Las Cruces, New Mexico, to a store that my parents and I shopped in on almost an everyday basis. And I always used to laugh because I would call it my very own store. El Paseo Drive, Las Cruces, New Mexico, Albertsons. It was my store. I owned it from the very young age that I walked in. My mom knew that I had a card collecting, a baseball card collection. It was just an addiction for me. I wanted every single baseball card I could get my hands onto. My mom would allow me to get one pack, probably once a week, once every other week, I could get a pack of cards. And she would pay for them. I didn't even have to earn that pack. She would get them for me because she knew that I would take care of them and I would organize them and put them in their baseball card sleeves, and I would write down every statistic of what card I got, how much it was worth, and I would file it all away. But on this day, I had a different motive in my mind as I walked to that Albertsons. You see, I had been building the thoughts within me that I was going to take my criminal activity outside of the home, away from taking the change off of my stepfather's top of his bed out of his change cup. I would stop taking the various dollar bills that were left around the home, either by my mother, my stepfather, my sister, my brother, whoever it might be. I always ended up with it in my pocket somehow, some way. But you see, today was different. This wasn't going to be a small-scale criminal activity for an 11-year-old. Oh no, I had planned, I had plotted, I knew exactly what was coming, and I even, yeah, that's right, I had planned my escape. For an 11-year-old, this is pretty serious stuff to walk down to Albertsons, main street of Las Cruces, New Mexico, a college town of all of about 80,000 people at the time, but oh, I strutted like I owned the place, and I knew exactly what I was doing. Carrying my duffel bag with me. That's right, a duffel bag. Let's just take this into consideration. This was not a small duffel bag. I wasn't there to just take a small handful. I wasn't there for a small-time crime. Oh no, this 11-year-old he was going to make a lick. When I walked into that Albertsons, I scoped out every aisle. I made sure I knew where each and every employee was, where was the cashier, where was the manager's cameras. And I walked directly for that baseball card aisle, and oh man, there were cards galore. There was basketball, baseball, football, you name it, they had it. And at the end of the day, they would no longer have it because my plan was in motion and they would all be mine. Took out my duffel bag as I watched everybody around me and started putting the boxes of the baseball cards, still sealed and wrapped in that plastic cellophane, into my duffel bag, to the point that it was just about to the brink full. But I needed to leave space. I had other items in mind that were just as important as those baseball cards. I needed to make sure that I left just enough space in that bag to ensure I got those items as well. I left that baseball card aisle. I was hawk-eyed. I was watching everybody around me. There's no way anybody was going to catch me. This was the heist of the century, and I was going to get away with it. But before I did, I had to go get that bottle of tequila and the bottle of vodka out of the Albertsons liquor aisle. This was the difficult part of the mission because you know what? undercover as I was, the baseball cards were simple. Nobody saw me. So I was already on the up and up, and now I just had to grab 2 little items and out the door I was going to be. But I had to duck and dodge in that alcohol aisle because obviously the legal age for alcohol purchase is 21. So they always had a cashier. I knew this because my mother was a wine drinker and my father, he would make mixed drinks on the weekends after working a very long week of work. So I knew exactly where each and every single item in that alcohol aisle was because I would be holding their hand just about every time they went in to get a little bit of their favorite drinks. I grabbed those 2 bottles, I stuffed them in there tight with those baseball, basketball, football cards. I zipped that bag up, I wrapped it around as if it was my gym's clothes, and I was on my way out. The heist, so far so good. This is a success. I know I'm getting away with it. I strutted my stuff like I knew the power within me was going to just make everybody turn their eyes and just never think that I could possibly be the one that would do anything like this. So when I walked out that front door, I was home free until I heard that over the intercom announcement. Somebody grabbed that kid walking out the front door. Whatever code did they say? Oh, it was loud. It was clear. I knew it was for me. It's just one of those things. You just know it's for you. So I ran. Bag and all. Little old 11-year-old ARHayes on the sprinting path to get away. I only had about 1.5 miles to be able to get back to my house, and it was going to be a clear path of weaving through the houses. I knew exactly what fences I had to jump. I knew every which way I needed to turn to be able to make it out safe and not get caught until I was yanked backwards by that strap of that bag to the point I fell on my butt so hard, and you could hear that bottle of alcohol come crashing down on the pavement. I jumped to run again, thinking that it was just a simple employee or maybe even a customer of Albertsons, until I got a better look, and it was one of the biggest officers I had ever seen in my life. What do you do at that point? I have no experiences in high-speed chases. Hell, I don't even have a car to get away in. How is this going to turn out to be a favorable situation for me? But I tried. Before you knew it, I was in cuffs, and I was sitting in the back of a police car, and my parents were being called. That's right, they have to call your parents. And my learning lesson was my stepfather saying, yeah, go ahead, you can arrest him. I'll meet you at the station. Me being a little bit cocky, thinking that my parents would never let me go to jail, just kind of bit my tongue and acted tough. I had my hands there in front of me because most times with 11-year-old kids, they don't cuff you behind your back. They cuff you in front. They place you pretty gently in the car. This is not like a ferocious dump you on your head into the car type of situation, but when we got to the police station and they walked me into that holding cell, and I could hear all of the others around me, and this was not a juvenile situation. These were real criminals in the cells around me, and the loneliness hit quick. The fear hit even quicker. The lesson was beginning to be learned. When I saw my stepdad step up to the glass of the holding cell door, I thought I was going home. I thought he was there to save me. Oh no, he was there to ensure that tough love was legitimately given face to face. He wanted me to know it was him that was making the decision to allow the punishment. All I did was watch him walk away, thinking to myself, he's got to be getting me out of here. He's got to be coming back. Until it was late into the night, going into the morning, and I was still laying on a concrete floor. That door swung open the next morning. Unfortunately, instead of going home, I was going to juvenile court. He'd allowed them to actually press charges against me. You see, my family, my stepfather, was built upon hard work, honesty, integrity, respect, love of family. He had worked at a feed and seed store his entire growing up with his other siblings. That was a family business, and it was hard work, and they all had straight A's. They went into the military. They got great educations. This was not a man that understood the criminal world at all. But he knew he wasn't going to allow his son to think it was okay to do these very things. You see, after that transpired, the teaching began. My stepfather started teaching me the very important skills of life, working around the house, changing tires on cars, how to change my own oil in my car. He began making me work. I had to earn things that I wanted. But on top of that, he never let me forget the lesson, because I was put on juvenile probation, that if I could complete it, and I went and I actually did the counseling properly, the case against me would be dismissed. It's called a deferred sentence. They give you the opportunity to work your way out of said sentence if you can showcase the steps to improving your life. I became more bonded with my stepfather than I ever had been with anybody in my life. With my past, I had no connection. I had no friendships. I had no family members that I grasped onto with any form of trust. I did not want bonds. I started playing golf with him on the weekends when he had time off. I started asking him more questions about everyday life, and I started following his lead to learn very key things in life. The problem was, where I was different from Bryan Kohberger, I didn't continue with that bond as I grew. I continued down the path of the criminal activity. I reverted back to the very same thinking and actions that had led him to have to discipline me and try to teach me. Instead of grasping that bond, instead of being like Bryan Kohberger, having a father willing to come across the country to drive home with him from college to home for the holidays, which shows a bond, shows a friendship, it shows trust. I threw all that out the window, not only with my stepfather, but my adoptive mother, my adoptive father, and everybody else in my family. I built it to where there was no longer a trust or a bond, because I couldn't get around my own self and my decision making. This is my opinion, but this is truly how I feel. Bryan Kohberger, if he is the actual committer of the Idaho 4, I don't believe he would have put his father in any type of risk driving back from Washington to Pennsylvania, much less being caught up in his parents' home for the crime being placed under arrest. I don't believe Bryan Kohberger would want to bring that pain or that devastation onto his family. I don't believe Bryan Kohberger would put any of them at risk at all. He would have ran into the darkness and hid on his very own. I don't know that for sure, but it's just a deep down gut feeling, because you know what? Even someone like myself who could not change, who did not change, never, ever actually put my family at risk. And what people are trying to tell us about Bryan Kohberger is that bond and that trust that he had in his very parents, the one trust that his dad was even at Washington State trying to help him make friends, and then to fly back out and drive across the country. And you want to tell me that Bryan, when he had every opportunity to deflect any of that negativity on the very people that were his bond, were his family, were his trust factor in life altogether, and you want me to believe that he was willing to put them at risk? I don't see it, because even I, who is a very selfish, narcissistic, criminalistic type person, would have never done that to my family. ARHayes, I appreciate you joining me. Let's all remember, yes, we have 4 victims and all of their families are devastated. But we also have a family that's devastated over just exactly what's happening with their son, the Kohberger family. Don't forget about them too.